And the irony is that the people who conflate being Jewish with being a Zionist are kind of rabid anti-Semites who use those terms interchangeably, and then places like Israel, the Israeli government, and AIPAC and the Anti-Defamation League. So
the conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism is such a category mistake. It's nonsensical. Criticizing a government's policies is not the same thing as espousing that whole nation state. Israel is not my homeland. I'm a citizen of the United States. Ethno-nationalism is vicious wherever it is. It's really a toxic creation, I'm sorry, of modernity. And I think we have to stand against it wherever, because it always means victimizing and marginalizing and ostracizing, if not killing, whole groups of people. So when Jews who went to Palestine and became Zionists embraced that kind of thinking, it was a tragedy. It was a tragedy for Jews in history. And we didn't know, we thought, well, all the mystification that says you have to embrace the state of Israel in order to be safe as a Jew. It's the opposite. It makes us less safe.
Yes.
Well, October 7th put an end to that, I think, once and for all.
I don't think most people think that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're saying this is the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust,
right.
And it occurred in Israel, which was ostensibly created to safeguard Jewish lives. So,
right.
Logically, you're right.
Yeah, right. Logically, you're right, but sadly, I think for lots of people, so the solution is to kill off the people of Gaza.
Right.
And which is,
shows
not
the work we have, the nature of the work we have to do.
Yeah.
The hard work we have to do.
Yeah, and we have to be clear on what anti-Semitism is when we also challenge what it isn't, when we also speak up against everyone who supports justice for Palestine and is falsely smeared as anti-Semitic. A 19-year-old Nazi was indicted this June for planning to carry out a mass shooting at my congregation, my synagogue, where I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, Congregation Sherry Tzedek, where I had my bar mitzvah, where my grandparents had their funerals, where my parents still attend services. The gunman planning this massacre was planning to carry it out on the 5th anniversary of the Christchurch massacre at the mosques in New Zealand. He had also written about his admiration for the shooter who carried out a shooting against Black people in a grocery store in Buffalo. This makes so clear that anti-Semitism is absolutely a threat to our community, and how we can confront it is by taking action against Islamophobia, speaking up against anti-Black racism, recognizing that we have to confront white supremacy together, that our safety and our freedom and our liberation is intertwined. So we refuse narratives that try to pit our communities against one another, and know that Palestinians deserve to live in freedom and with dignity, and supporting justice for Palestinians brings us closer to a world where we all get to live with justice, where we all get to feel safe.
And Jay's story underlines how the same people who hate Jews hate Black people, the same people who hate Muslims hate Jews.
Right.
That hatred, it is basically about white supremacy. And we have to join together.
There's this insidious kind of Jewish attitude toward anti-Semitism, which is that it's somehow exceptional, that it's somehow a unique form of hatred, different from all others in the world, and that to be a Jew just means to be inherently unsafe more than anybody else, to be the archetypal victim targeted person in the world. And I think after October 7th, we're seeing that meme, that trope being spread through the Jewish community in really, really destructive ways, when what we need to be doing right now more than ever along with what Jay and Roz are saying, is we need to be finding safety through solidarity, because, you know, hatred against a particular group of people is the same. You know, we're seeing a rise in intolerances all over the world for the last 10 plus years. And it's a time, if ever there was a time for solidarity, it's right now. But the circling of the wagons in the Jewish community, I just find to be so toxic and insidious.
Right.
And that trope has been cultivated
Yeah.
deliberately by Zionists and Zionist organizations to garner support, to make people, to use the politics of fear
Right.
and make people feel that they have no choice.
Right.
So we have to show them an alternative, a different way of being, a different approach to justice.
Right. And it is, I mean, what do you guys say to all these people who say, without Israel, Jews would be killed? Without Israel, Israel's the only reason we haven't had another Holocaust. What's your response to those things? Because I keep encountering that.
So why haven't you moved to Israel? You're standing right here on Broadway in your fur coat.
I would say it's
Tell
the
me.
opposite. I think Israel makes Jews unsafe all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, I think if we all agree that it's anti-Semitic to associate Jews with all Jews everywhere with the actions of the state of Israel, the problem is that Israel purports to be the state for all Jews everywhere.
Right.
So everything Israel does impacts on all of us. And when Israel acts oppressively, that reflects on Jews throughout the diaspora and makes us patently unsafe. And so Zionism in Israel does no favors for Jews and is certainly not a recipe for Jewish safety and security, and it never has been.
Right. Someone in the comments, I just want to debunk this, but you, Rabbi, would be better served. Someone said, Israel and Judaism makes you unsafe. Israel makes you unsafe. I would say Judaism doesn't.
No. I mean, I think we just addressed the issue that Israel and Judaism are not the same thing. No, Judaism, to my mind, Judaism is a spiritual system for trying to find, you know, injustice throughout the world and healing it and addressing these injustices wherever we happen to live. You know, Zionism is a political movement that arose, you know, very, very recently, that, as Roz was saying, is a form of Jewish ethno-nationalism that doesn't make anybody safe.
Right.
But I will say our actions in Grand Central, in the rotunda of the office building, in the Statue of Liberty, all of these actions have aroused tremendous support, and from lots of people who are both Jewish and not Jewish. Lots of Muslims, lots of people, South Asians. I'm sure Jay and Rabbi Brant have also gotten so many thank yous and comments from people saying, oh, we didn't know that this way of thinking existed, and this is so encouraging. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I'll have older like conservatives or PEP, the term PEP, progressive except on Palestine. They'll say to me, you're making Jews less safe by criticizing Israel. I'm like, no, we're running interference for Israel. Israel's making us unsafe by claiming to act in our names. It's not only the right thing to do to say that Israel isn't acting in our names, but it happens to be, I think, like a safety issue as well.
Yeah. I mean, I never experienced, I was walking down the street one day I have to say, I felt very insulated from anti-Semitism. But I one day was little old lady walking down the street in my neighborhood, and a tall white guy said, dirty Jew to me. I mean, nobody ever said that to me in New York City. In my entire 81 years, nobody had ever said that to me. And I was so shocked I couldn't say anything. You know, where is that coming from?
Yeah. Wow.
So it's real. I mean, it's very real.
Right.
But Israel does nothing to address anti-Semitism. They just stir it up.
And do you think the media is complicit in, the Western media is complicit in suggesting that Judaism and Jewishness and Zionism are the same?
Speak, Rabbi.
Yes. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, if you look at the mainstream media, when they go for comments about what's going on in the world, they go to Jewish community organizations like Jewish federations, like the Anti-Defamation League, like, Jewish establishment organizations that are thoroughly Zionist, because they assume they speak for all Jews. And so that creates, the impression among the readers that that we are somehow a monolithic community, and that we line up behind Judaism in the state of Zionism in the state of Israel, which is just absolutely not true. I think one of the wonderful things about these JVP actions is that they are getting great press,
Yeah.
and JVP's image is being lifted up, I think, in an unprecedented kind of way, and it's just wonderful. It's so liberating to see Jewish spokespeople like those of us in JVP speaking for a large and increasing quarter of the Jewish community that is anti-Zionist, that doesn't support what Israel's doing, and that stand with Palestinians.
Right.
And I think there is a shift in the narrative. It's beginning, even in the mainstream media. I mean, I was quoted in the New York Times one sentence after our Grand Central action. And then the march in Washington on Saturday, it was Palestinian led, hundreds of thousands of people. That was important because it was the first time, it was the largest representation of Palestinians in the public eye in Washington, D.C., saying not only ceasefire now, not only end the occupation, which really goes for 75 years, not since 1967, but since 1948, saying, we're not going to vote for you. We're done. And lots of young people are feeling that way too. So the political pressure is on. Lots of young people in the State Department have signed a letter. Young, staffers in Congress are starting to listen, to speak out, because they don't agree, and they really see this as a bad foreign policy for the U.S. So I think there is a shift.
I think one of the tensions, though, in doing Palestine solidarity work as a Jew, and one of the potential pitfalls, is that that we not make it too much about us.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to be aware of. That the first order of business is ending the oppression of Palestinians and liberating Palestinians, and not liberating Judaism. I mean, that's important too. But I think we need to be very, very, very clear that if we're in solidarity with Palestinians, it means we're accountable to them. And
Right.
so I think the more successful we are, I think the more that's going to be something that we're going to need to address. That we don't want to hog the spotlight for these wonderful Jews who are standing in solidarity with Palestinians, as important as the work that we're doing is.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, so to be fair, the second half of my show is going to be with Craig McIver, who's talking about, resigning from the UN. But I also do think it's important to show the world that the Jews who claim to speak for all of us and stand with Israel don't have a monopoly of what it means to be Jewish.
No question.
And
No
that,
question.
as you guys have articulated so well, it actually, I would argue, like, the Jewish thing to do is to be in solidarity with Palestinians. It's not to be on the side of settler colonialism and ethno-nationalism.
Well, I think Jay and I are part of Jewish Voice for Peace New York City, and I think Rabbi Brant would really agree with this. We take our aim from Palestinian partners. Our Palestinian partners, we consult all the time. What should we do? We've gotten this idea that speaking out as Jews is helpful right now. That saying ceasefire now is the most urgent thing at this moment. But we feel like we're part of a movement that is guided by Palestinians. And that should always be the case, as long as we're fighting for Palestinian liberation.
Yeah, that's key to any solidarity movement, is that kind of accountability.
Yeah. And what is next for you guys?
More zip ties. There are some things in the works. There's a new ad hoc initiative you may have heard of, called Rabbis for Ceasefire, and there are many members of the JVP Rabbinical Council who are involved in it, but it's actually reached out beyond JVP, and we're actively trying to organize a larger group of rabbis who are not affiliated with JVP and may not be ready to be, but are ready to stand up publicly and say ceasefire now. And so we put out a statement and a viral video last week. There's going to be some more activities and actions in the future. So that's something I'm really excited about.
And Roz and Jay, anything else you want to announce?
Can we reveal what's coming? Jay knows more than I do, but it's sort of ad hoc. We go day to day and week to week.
Yeah, and I would say in response as well to what the media has done and what narratives have changed, we have constantly been erased. And any change in narrative that Roz has described has been because of our organizing, the ways that we've intervened to challenge that. The day after our first march on October 7th to Senator Schumer's home, the Washington Post published an article that said Jews are united in solidarity with their support for Israel. The day after Roz and I were arrested, taken the next week outside of his home, the day that we were on a bus, there were multiple city busfuls driving us to jail. Somebody announced on that bus, they did a mic check and announced, we have somebody on this bus who's 81 years old. She's older than the state of Israel. Roz is a living example that Judaism beyond Zionism is possible, that we can build a world beyond Zionism. But that next day, the New York Times on their cover published an article that said Jews across our differences are coming together to support Israel. So there was that constant erasure. And what we knew is that we would have to take historic, unprecedented action that has never happened before to create such a spectacle that could not be ignored. And that's what we did when we staged that massive sit-in in Congress, which was the largest mass arrest of rabbis in US history, more than the 16 rabbis who were arrested in St. Augustine, Florida with Dr. King during the civil rights movement. That's what we did when we took over Grand Central Station, the biggest train station in the world, completely shutting it down during rush hour traffic on Friday. That's how we got on the cover of the New York Times again. It isn't just that the reporters started to ask us questions. It's that we took action. 400 people were arrested that night. Thousands were packed inside. Thousands, I believe you even tried to get in and couldn't because there were so many thousands already inside that you joined the thousands overflowing outside into the streets of Midtown Manhattan. We know that the only way we can change narratives, the only way that we can build the international outcry necessary to stop the bombing is to keep organizing, to keep taking collective action on unprecedented scales. And so that's what we're going to continue to do. The night that I got out of jail with Roz after that picture that we saw outside of Schumer's, I got out of jail at 5 a.m. that morning and immediately got into organizing what we were doing next in DC. The next day, I was supposed to be at the Yiddish Book Center for an exhibit that was opening that I have work in. And I've been planning to be at that exhibit opening for a long time. And the curator was invited me and excited for me to be there. I was in a car down to DC and where I locked myself in a hotel room with the rest of the core organizers of that demonstration all week, because this is what we are doing in this moment. And we're going to continue to organize, to devote every waking second to continue to build the international outcry necessary to stop these bombs and to bring about justice for the people of Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza.